Summary. In a brutal world where everything seeks to kill you, being suspicious and paranoid keeps you alive. Chapter 6: Language Barriers. Climbing through another pipe, the slugcats eventually reached the shelter survivor had mentioned. He noticed Hunter looking nervous when they had to crawl through some tight tunnels to reach the small den, but they luckily didn't have to spend a long time crawling through to reach their destination. As they reached a small junction, Survivor led them upward, popping out of the tunnels into a small outside area. Hunter climbed up close behind, looking around in confusion. Indeed, in the area they were in, there were no pipes leading to a shelter. In fact, there were no pipes at all. It was a small cubic area with walls on all sides. The walls were high enough that they couldn't be scaled without a spear, but not so high that they were intimidating. There was wilderness all around them, but in the small cubic pit, there was nothing. Just red stalks sticking out of the ground. Suddenly, Hunter fell into a rough coughing fit, hunching over slightly. Survivor chirped worriedly and took a step towards him, but Hunter waved him off, his cough finally ceasing. "I'm fine, I just inhaled some dust, or something." Before Survivor could respond, Hunter hummed and, after looking around a bit more, finally spoke. "So, what are we doing here, anyway?" Survivor narrowed his eyes, looking suspiciously at Hunter. Did he really cough that much, and that harshly, over some dust? After a moment's thought, he decided to let it go for now. It was probably just some minor symptoms of a cold or something. They had swam through a lot of cold water after all. "I still haven't eaten, remember?" Hunter looked over to Survivor, staring at him with his brow raised, before gesturing around the area. "But there's nothing to eat here?" The white slugcat looked at him in confusion before coming to the realization that Hunter exclusively ate meat to satisfy his hunger, so it made sense for him to never have even considered eating from a popcorn plant. "I wonder if he even knows how to open one." Survivor smirked as he looked around, spotting a spear lodged in the ground next to Hunter and pointing towards it. "Hey, pass me that spear, I want to show you something." The red slugcat looked even more confused at this but eventually relented, dislodged the spear, and handed it to Survivor. He waved the spear in his hands for a moment before turning towards the unpopped plant, taking a deep breath, and winding his arm back. With an exhale, he threw the spear into the plant. The spear bounced off as the plant shed its skin, the kernels inside expanding with an audible pop. Hunter stared in awe as Survivor smiled and took one of the kernels, eating it in a single bite. "I've never seen something like that before," Hunter mumbled, still seeming to be in slight disbelief that the plants were edible. Seeing his hesitance, Survivor plucked another kernel and held it out towards him. "You want to try one? They're pretty good." Hunter leaned forward and sniffed at the kernel, very carefully reaching out to take it from Survivor's hand, like he was afraid it would blow up or something. "Don't worry, they don't bite," Survivor added with a teasing smile. The kernel was snatched out of his paw as Hunter muttered something under his breath. He paused to study the piece of food for a moment before finally putting it in his mouth and chewing. His eyes lit up as he chewed the kernel and Survivor laughed and reached for another. "See? They're delicious, right?" Hunter seemed to realize he'd looked a bit too excited and schooled his expression into a more neutral one. "They're acceptable." Survivor gave him an incredulous look before plucking another kernel from the plant. "I take it you don't want another one, then?" He held the food out in front of Hunter's eyes, waving it back and forth, laughing at the way Hunter's eyes followed the object. Eventually, Hunter scoffed and impatiently grabbed the popcorn from Survivor's paws. "Just give it here," he said, amusement clear in his annoyed voice, as he popped the kernel into his mouth, eyes closing with satisfaction as he savored the taste. As Hunter enjoyed his snack, Survivor glanced up into the skies. Seeing that the clouds still hadn't gathered together close enough to start the rain, he came to the conclusion that this cycle had been a very long one. He scanned the skies, suddenly scared of how out in the open they were. What if they were spotted by a patrolling vulture and one of them got snatched up? He glanced over at Hunter, who seemed to be thinking the same, staring at the skyline. After Hunter had stood completely still for a whole minute, not moving an inch, Survivor got worried instead. "Hey, Hunter!" He called out. "Something wrong?" Hunter didn't even twitch an ear in his direction, he just kept staring at nothing. Slightly disturbed, Survivor approached his friend and reached a paw out. After a small moment's hesitation, he grabbed Hunter's shoulder and shook it gently. The red slug cat jumped slightly before turning to look at him, confusion in his eyes. "Ha! What?" Survivor withdrew his paw and fidgeted nervously for a moment. "Are you all right? You seemed pretty out of it." Hunter's eyes widened for a quick moment before he turned around, waving his paw dismissively. "Don't worry about it." He walked to the tunnels they had come through before continuing. "I was just thinking about collecting another spear. The one I have barely counts as one, you know?" Hunter glanced up at the sky, looking back at Survivor with a serious expression. "If you hear the flap of vulture wings, don't hesitate to hide, okay?" Survivor was confused by this sudden change of pace but nodded anyway. Hunter nodded back, his expression softening slightly. "I'll be right back, I promise." With that, Hunter jumped down and crawled through the tunnels to exit the pipe and scout for spears. Hunt for spears, now. Seriously? Survivor grumbled to himself as he plucked another kernel from the plant, deep in thought as he chewed. Though Survivor knew Hunter could easily take care of himself, he couldn't help but worry. There was strength in numbers. What if Hunter got hurt? Survivor would have no idea. He looked to the skies. The clouds were finally gathering. He should eat quickly, just in case. He grabbed a kernel and put it in his mouth, savoring the slightly salty taste. He knew Hunter was smart enough to come running back before the cycle ended, but what if he was ambushed by a dropwig or something? He shook his head and stuffed another kernel in his mouth. No, Hunter was way too perceptive to be caught by a measly dropwig. But everyone makes mistakes. Survivor suppressed a worried whine with another kernel. He was full now. But where was Hunter? He looked up at the sky again. Clouds were gathering en masse, and Survivor had a feeling the ground would start shaking any moment now. "Come on, Hunter. Come on!" Survivor's thoughts were interrupted by a loud thud coming from right behind him. Startled, he whipped around with his spear pulled back, ready to throw it at any threat. He came face to face with a mask-like face with antlers protruding and wide orange eyes staring fearfully at him. A lone scavenger? Had they been separated from his group? The scavenger quickly backed up against the wall and chittered fearfully. Maybe they fell off the edge while scouting the area? The scavenger seemed terrified, probably on account of Survivor's own spear, and raised their own in warning. "Wait!" Survivor all but screamed as he dropped low to the ground, dropping his spear in front of him and trying to make himself look as small and unthreatening as possible. The scavenger seemed startled by the loud noise, flinching and pulling back their spear-throwing arm. Survivor shut his eyes tightly, expecting to feel the sharp object lodge itself in his flesh any second. He just wished it would be quick. His previous mishaps with the scavengers hadn't been, when he had mistaken their paranoia for aggression and tried to threaten them. In turn, they got scared and speared him. He hadn't died immediately, and the scavengers had run off in fear, leaving him to slowly bleed out from his wounds. He tensed up and whimpered as he heard cautious steps approaching. "Here it comes." The pain. After a short moment more, he heard something metal get picked up off the ground. Survivor dared to open his eyes just a crack to see the scavenger looking at him with cautious curiosity. They had stashed their own spear on their back, along with Survivor's dropped one. Survivor opened his eyes fully and stared at the scavenger. They stared back and tilted their head. Survivor took a deep breath and, with his paws visible to show he wasn't going for a weapon, slowly rose to his feet. The scavenger seemed a bit nervous at the movement but didn't make any moves to draw their weapons. When Survivor reached his full height, the scavenger looked calm, still seeming fairly wary of the slugcat, but at least they were not hostile. It made sense for smart creatures like the scavengers to be wary of anything that moved in a world where pretty much everything seemed to want to kill you. The scavenger closed their eyes and tilted their head, chittering in what sounded like a happy tone. Survivor responded with a happy chirp of his own, smiling at the scavenger. They looked pretty happy about this limited communication, suddenly reaching their hand out. Survivor flinched but didn't move as the scavenger put their hand on his head. He found himself pleasantly surprised when they used their digits to gently comb through his fur. and he chittered happily once again. Survivor purred in response, enjoying the combing he was getting. Suddenly, the scavenger retracted their hand as a skittering noise was heard in the tunnels below. Before Survivor had a chance to turn around to see what was happening, he saw the scavenger glance up and chitter in fear, reaching for a spear on their back. Survivor felt his breath leave his lungs as he once again thought back to how it felt to be stabbed through with a spear. The scavenger pulled a spear off its back, pulling it back to be thrown. Survivor threw himself to the ground, pushing himself into as small a ball as he could, his panicked mind racing faster than he could keep up with. No, 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 please no. Dodge. Grab a rock. Do anything. You need to defend yourself. You need to survive. What did I do wrong? Why would they want me dead? Why? It's going to hurt. I don't want it to hurt. I'm scared. Survivor shut his eyes tight, protectively covering his head with his paws. No, please don't. He heard a whoosh of air right above him, followed by a loud thunk and the sound of something hitting the ground. Slowly, he uncovered his head. The only sounds he could hear were the wind and his own panic breaths. Next, he opened his eyes. What he saw made him freeze up in terror. The scavenger he had just befriended was dead, a sharp spear lodged between their wide, unseeing eyes, pinning them to the wall they had been standing against. Survivor whimpered as he heard footsteps behind him, tensing up again as he prepared for the scavenger's killer to end him next. He gasped when the footsteps continued past him, and a red slugcat he immediately recognized stepped into his view and forcefully pulled the spear free of the corpse's head, letting it collapse to the ground in a heap. Hunter stared at the corpse for a moment before looking back towards Survivor, the burning rage in his eyes dissipating as he stared Survivor in the eyes. As he spoke, there was something akin to worry in his tone. Are you